DIY herbal poultices are a great way to support your horse. We use these quite often, especially in rehab cases where we are rehabbing from tendon and ligament injuries. If we have horses that get stocked up easily in stall rest, they're just a phenomenal way to drive in some of the medicinal properties of herbs. So we thought we'd throw together a quick DIY series for you on how you can support your horse using an herbal poultice. So, why use an herbal poultice? Herbs have natural healing properties, anywhere from they can support with pain relief, anti-inflammatory. They have an incredible ability to draw out toxins or infections. They have antiseptic properties. So by infusing a tea or clay with herbs, it's just a really great way that you can promote healing and speed recovery time in your horse. They offer great pain relief and anti-inflammatory support. So if you have a horse with arthritis, or maybe they have a tendon or ligament injury, or some sort of inflammation going on in the body, it's a really great way to help support them. If you have arthritis conditions that are more chronic and tend to get worse in cold temperatures, you can add in some warming herbs to boost circulation. Or if you have, a lot of heat and acute inflammatory inflammation, you can add in some cooling herbs and a drawing poultice to help support and draw all of that out. So again, like I said, injury recovery and wound healing. So if you have a horse that might have injured themselves, maybe has a tear to a ligament, or a kick injury, something like that, where there's some acute swelling, wound healing. We've had a lot of cases where we've had septic infections, and after multiple surgeries at the hospital, they weren't able to clear it, and the antibiotics were being ineffective. And so we incorporated some herbal poultices and helped draw out the infection, and the horses, both cases, recovered with great results. So that's another option, just to speed up wound healing. And then also edema. So we often use this if there's any sort of pitting edema or swelling. So we have a horse here that tends to get cellulitis relatively easy, and he is on stall rest for a ligament injury. And we noticed he was starting to get a little bit stocked up. So we threw a poultice on him, and you can see the before and after in the next few slides. But we had, great results just drawing out that inflammation. So materials that you are going to want is some sort of cotton padding. So whether it's that store-bought cotton roll, or a reusable cotton pad that you can wash and reuse for multiple poultices, a polo wrap, or if it's temporary, using vet wrap is okay. I tend to use more of the cotton padding and the polo wraps just because I'm doing a lot of these and I want to reuse them. So I will do a poultice, throw them in a wash, and then I have them to use again, versus using something disposable like vet wrap. And then they have store-bought poultice wraps. They also have poultice pads for hooves that you can purchase, or you can use a large non-stick pad, just making sure it's large enough to cover the area or to fully wrap around the limb, or some sort of thick gauze. Often I'll use cotton cast padding just because it's a little bit thicker and it'll absorb the tea a little bit better. And then saran wrap. So if you are using a non-stick pad or a gauze, you're going to want to use saran wrap. Water and a tea kettle. So just making sure that if you are using the poultice for any sort of wound care or to help clear an infection, make sure you use distilled water so we're not introducing any bacteria into the wound itself. So you will prep your herbs into a tea and allow them to slightly cool. So the tea should be warm when applied, but not hot. And I actually will pack and make a paste with the soaked herbs in my wrap and just include them when I'm wrapping it. And I'll generally use about equal parts of whatever herbs that I decide to use. And then herbs that I like to use, so for wound care, plantain, calendula, comfrey, yarrow, golden seal, usnea, Oregon grapefruit, and marshmallow root are really great options. One note about comfrey. So comfrey is actually known as knit bone. It's has beautiful uses for bone trauma or to really speed up wound healing. However, it can speed up the healing so fast that I would avoid using it for deeper wounds, puncture wounds, because we want the wound to heal from the inside out. And sometimes comfrey will speed up the healing to the point where we create a little pocket. And so that could trap infection. So I tend to not use poultices when there is a deep wound. I will support flushing that wound with saline and then using something like Manuka honey until we've started to make more progress. And then I'll incorporate some of our herbal poultices. Unless, of course, we need to support and draw out infection, like we talked about with the septic. So just be mindful of when you're using it for wound care and using it at the appropriate stage of healing. And then arthritis, some good herbs. So we have ginger that can be a little bit more warming, peppermint that you can incorporate that's a bit more cooling, willow bark, comfrey, arnica. Again, making sure arnica, if you're using it, there's no open wounds nearby. And St. John's wort and helichrysum. And then for edema, dandelion, horse chestnut, marshmallow root, cleavers, yarrow, calendula, and comfrey. For ligaments and tendons, I really like comfrey, arnica, St. John's wort, helichrysum, and Oregon grapefruit. So when I'm applying a poultice to the hoof, I will use either the poultice pad that you can buy at the store, or I will use a diaper. So I will first soak the hoof in an Epsom salt bath and make sure that I am getting it fully clean. And then I take my prepped tea with the herb paste and I will pour it in the diaper or on the poultice pad. And then I will apply that pad. So if I'm using a diaper, I will wrap the diaper around the hoof and then I will secure it with vet wrap and then duct tape as just a quick and easy way. And I'll leave it on there for a few hours and help draw everything out and then pull it off and dry the foot off. And then you can further protect it, throw on a boot, something like that. Okay, so here is a quick video. We had a horse that I talked about that is here for a ligament injury, but he tends to get cellulitis. So we threw on a poultice. So you can see I used a large non-stick pad just because I had several of them on hand that I needed to use. So you can see I have the tea applied to it already, and I leave the herbs on there. So you'll apply the poultice. And in this case, I used just some brown gauze. I make sure I'm only using it to secure. I'm not putting any pull or tension on it. I'm simply just using the brown gauze to hold my poultice pads in place. So, you can use any type of gauze. So when you're wrapping, remember you're going to do front to back, out to in when you're wrapping the horse's leg. After applying the brown gauze, then you're going to put a layer of saran wrap. And essentially you're using the saran wrap to help trap in the heat and really bring circulation to the area and allow the herbs to penetrate. Again, if you are using a poultice pad, you can skip this step because you already have the plastic backing on your poultice pad. And then after the saran wrap, you're going to apply some sort of cotton padding. So I tend to use these, like I said, these cotton ones that I can wash and reuse. You want to make sure there's no wrinkles in it. Um, and then after that, you will apply your polo wrap, or you can also use a vet wrap. Again, making sure you're wrapping in the direction from front to back. And then once you are finished wrapping, you can leave the poultice on for a few hours. You can do just during the day where you can monitor them for 3 to 4 hours. All right, so here you can see the before and after of our overnight poultice. So you can see how much that drew out a lot of the stagnation and the edema in that hind limb for him. So here is a before and after of a mare we actually had in for rehab. She had a septic tendon sheath, and after 3 surgeries, she was not clearing the infection and she was not responding to antibiotics. So we started using a poultice. We did it every few days just to see if we could draw out the infection. And within 3 weeks, she was infection free. So she rehabbed beautifully, and we sent her home. And unfortunately, they had a cold snap and she was in the stall and she was not moving. And so they contacted me and said, her leg is swollen again. What can we do? So I went out and we threw on another poultice and just left it on overnight. So here you can see, again, the before and after of an overnight poultice. For her, we just focused on herbs that would support her tendon, as well as some lymph support and some drawing herbs like marshmallow root to just draw everything out. So you can just see how helpful these poultices can be in supporting your horse. So another lovely way to use a poultice is by using a clay poultice. So you can prep your herbal tea. I will strain all of my herbs out of the tea, and then I will infuse either bentonite or French green clay. And then when you are mixing it, just make sure you use a wooden spoon. We want to avoid using metal just because they can interact with the clays and minerals. So just make sure you're using a wooden spoon to mix it up, and then you can apply it to the desired area. So you can wrap with a poultice to keep the clay wet longer. Clay has an incredible ability to draw out, and so if you're wrapping it, it can just stay wet longer, and it will draw out inflammation and any toxins or anything that's in the body. Or you can also leave it and let it dry and then just brush it off. I think one thing I love about using clay poultices is if you are trying to determine where exactly the inflammation is coming from in an area of the body, you can put a clay poultice on and it will stay wet longer wherever there is heat and more inflammation. So, for example, if you have a horse that is having a little bit of arthritis in their knee and you're not sure exactly where the arthritis is at, if you throw a clay poultice on over the entire knee, and I will do front, sides, back, all over the knee, and then you allow it to dry, you might see that on the medial side of the knee that it's wet a little bit longer. So that gives you really good insight that most likely the area that is impacting the horse the most is on that medial side of the knee. And so then you can take a look at their feet and see, is there anything that you can do with their trim to better support them, to take off the compression and to create more space within that joint capsule. There's different bodywork techniques that you can use to support, but it's a really good way to not only help infuse herbs into that area and draw out inflammation, but it also can help you really pinpoint where in the body your horse is struggling the most.